There's a strange kind of power that lives in silence. Think about it in a room full of men trying to prove something, talking louder, flexing harder, posting more. Why is it the quiet one who gets noticed? Not because he's the richest, not because he's the most charming, but because he makes her wonder. What's his story? Why hasn't he texted back yet? Why does he feel so close, yet so far away? The truth is, women aren't just attracted to confidence. They're magnetized by curiosity. Not knowing makes the mind restless, and the restless mind obsesses. That's why mystery has always been more seductive than perfection. Because perfection is complete and mystery is open-ended. You see, most men try to win women by being more available, more vulnerable, more expressive. But here's the twist no one tells you: the more she knows about you too soon, the less she feels. Mystery isn't about hiding, it's about pacing. It's about letting her earn your truth, not handing it out like a coupon. And once you understand how this works, you won't chase anymore. You'll stand still and she'll move toward you. Let's get one thing straight from the beginning. Mystery is not a tactic, it's a principle. A tactic is something you use to get short-term results, like delaying a text reply just to appear busy. But a principle, that's something you live. Real mystery doesn't come from games. It comes from depth, from having a world inside you that isn't on display for everyone. In today's culture where everything is shared and overshared, where people post what they're eating, where they're going, how they're feeling, being mysterious isn't just attractive, it's rare. And what's rare, it becomes desirable. Most guys think being mysterious means being unavailable or cold, but that's not it. Mystery doesn't mean withholding your affection. It means making your presence feel like a privilege, not a public service. Think of it this way. A Stoic man doesn't walk into a room trying to be known. He walks in already knowing who he is. And that changes everything. When you carry that kind of calm certainty, you don't need to prove anything. You don't need to tell her every story from your childhood. You don't need to explain your goals, your ex, your trauma in the first 3 dates. You let those things unfold, not out of fear, but out of strength. Because you've learned that what is earned is always more respected than what is given away. There's an old saying, never allow someone to know you before they've earned the right to. But in modern dating, men are pressured into doing exactly the opposite. Social media, dating apps, and the instant gratification economy push us into oversharing, into thinking if I don't tell her everything, she'll lose interest. But the opposite is often true. When you tell her everything up front, you rob her of the one thing the human brain craves more than answers. Tension. Tension is the space between what she knows and what she wants to know. That space, that's where attraction lives, that's where her imagination starts working overtime. And when a woman starts imagining you, you're already deeper in her mind than any perfectly worded message could ever take you. That's why being too transparent too soon backfires. Not because women don't want honesty, but because they don't want a story that ends in chapter 1. In the realm of Stoicism, there's a powerful idea. Don't speak unless what you say is better than silence. This doesn't mean be cold or closed off. It means value your words, protect your presence. When you speak less, each word carries more weight. When you reveal less, each reveal becomes a moment. That's what women remember, not the volume of what you said, but the gravity. So how do you become that kind of man? Not by faking mystery, but by living a full inner life. Build passions you don't post about. Pursue goals you don't always explain. Spend time alone thinking your own thoughts. Then when you do speak, it comes from substance, not from seeking approval. And that's the real power. Because mystery without substance is just withholding. But mystery with depth, that's magnetic. So here's the truth. You don't need to be the loudest man in the room. You just need to be the one that makes her pause. Pause and wonder, what's behind that smile? Why did he leave that text unanswered? What's he thinking right now? And while she's asking those questions, you've already become unforgettable. Let's make this real. You might be thinking, okay, I get the theory, but does this actually work in the real world? Absolutely. In fact, you've seen it work more times than you realize. You've probably even felt it yourself. Let me show you how. Imagine you match with someone on a dating app. Her bio says, I'm 27, love hiking, wine nights, horror movies, I'm afraid of clowns. I want kids in 3 years, I have anxiety, and I overthink everything. Now that might sound honest, but does it spark curiosity, or does it feel like reading the last page of the book? Compare that to someone who simply writes, try to guess what I do for a living. You'll probably be wrong. One is complete, the other is a question, and questions make the brain itch to answer. That's how mystery works. It pulls attention without asking for it. Think about James Bond. He doesn't explain himself. He doesn't overshare. He doesn't send long texts about how he feels confused lately. And yet women in his world are drawn to him, not because he's emotionally unavailable, but because he's self-contained. He reveals just enough to invite curiosity and no more. He lives with intensity, not insecurity. The irony, you don't need to be a secret agent to do that. You just need to build a life that's meaningful and not need anyone to validate it. Picture the guy at your office or co-working space who doesn't talk much. He's polite but reserved, focused, rarely overshares, and somehow everyone wants to know what he's thinking. People project stories onto him. Maybe he's working on something big. Maybe he's quietly brilliant. Maybe he's not interested in the office gossip because he's beyond it. The point is, he doesn't have to tell his story. He makes others imagine it, and imagination, that's always more powerful than explanation. Look at someone like Keanu Reeves. He rarely posts, rarely speaks unless he means it. And when he does, the world listens. Now compare that to a celebrity who live streams everything, what they eat, who they date, what drama they're in today. Who do people respect more? Mystery builds legacy. Noise just builds burnout. And this applies whether you have 10 million followers or 10 friends. Psychologists call it the uncertainty effect. In one study, women were shown the same guy's profile under 2 different scenarios. In one version, he clearly liked them. In the other, he was ambiguous. Maybe, maybe not. Guess who they couldn't stop thinking about? The second one. Not because he was better looking, but because uncertainty triggers attention loops in the brain. You wonder, you fixate, you obsess. The same thing happens when you send a text and don't get a reply right away. That space, the weight, it amplifies everything. Use that wisely, not to play games, but to let space work for you. So what do these stories teach us? That mystery is not only attractive, it's universally effective. From apps to offices to red carpets to your own life. The man who holds something back not because he's hiding, but because he's full, will always hold the upper hand. Not just in romance, but in respect, in leadership, in influence. Because the one who makes people wonder controls the room without ever needing to raise his voice. At this point, let's go deeper, not just into the behavior, but the biology. Why does mystery work on women, on people in general? Because your brain is not wired for clarity, it's wired for reward, and reward requires tension. When you watch a movie and don't know what's coming next, your brain releases dopamine. When you know exactly what will happen, the dopamine dies. That's why rewatching a spoilered movie feels flat. Women are not addicted to men, they're addicted to emotion, to the anticipation of what might come next. That's why a man who creates subtle unpredictability isn't confusing, he's unforgettable. In neuroscience, this is called the intermittent reinforcement loop. It's the same logic behind slot machines. You don't win every time, but sometimes, and that maybe keeps you hooked. Likewise, when a man offers presence, then pulls back. When he shows warmth, then returns to stillness. He triggers that same cycle of curiosity and emotional investment. Not because he's playing games, but because he isn't predictable. On an evolutionary level, women were wired to detect potential, not just performance. In ancestral environments, women sought men who were capable, competent, and had internal stability. And here's the paradox: men who were too obvious, too eager, or too available were seen as less valuable. Why? Because high-value males didn't need to chase, they were chosen. So today, when a man doesn't rush to explain himself, when he doesn't constantly seek her approval, he mimics that ancient cue: I am already valued. You're not the center of my life, but you might become part of it. That makes her lean in. That creates the what's he thinking spiral. And when she's in that spiral, she's no longer in control of the narrative, you are. Here's another layer no one talks about. Women connect through stories. They remember moments, not just facts. That's why a man who gives her just enough to imagine becomes bigger in her mind than a man who gave her everything. If you say, I'm an architect, I work downtown, I have a dog named Max, that's fine. But if you say, I build spaces that make people feel different, I'm obsessed with old cathedrals and new silence, that leaves room for her mind to wander, to craft an image, to emotionally attach to a man she hasn't even figured out yet. You've become a character in a story, and characters, they're relived, replayed obsessively. Most men make the mistake of trying to provide closure, but desire doesn't thrive on closure. It thrives on contrast. That's why the most addictive people are rarely the most consistent. They're the ones who are calm but wild, present but independent, sweet but slightly out of reach. They confuse just enough to create a spark, then disappear just enough to make it last. Predictability is not safety, it's stagnation. A man who always says good morning and how was your day at the same time every day might feel comforting, but he also feels forgettable, the Stoics taught us. He who controls himself controls the world. Mystery begins inside. Not in your actions, but in your energy. If you are rooted, centered, and not moved by every external reaction, you naturally become harder to read. And the harder you are to read, the more she reads into you. That's how mystery works. Not through hiding, but through holding. Holding your words, holding your reactions, holding your need to be seen. So if you're still asking, how do I become more mysterious? It's not about acting different. It's about being deeper. Build a life that speaks for you. Let your stillness say more than your posts. And let her curiosity work for you, not against you. Because the woman who's wondering where she stands is already standing inside your mind. So now you understand the theory. You've seen the real-life patterns. You know the psychology. But the question remains, how do you actually live this? How do you become the kind of man that women don't just meet, but remember? Let me show you the 7 rules of modern mystery. Practical, grounded, Stoic Rule 1. Say less, mean more. Most men think talking a lot equals sign connecting, but often the more you say, the more you dilute your message. Be deliberate with your words. When you speak, pause before and after key thoughts. Let silence frame your ideas. Instead of saying, I really like you, I think we have a connection, and I'd love to hang out more if you're free. Say, let's grab coffee sometime, I want to see what you're about. Few words, more weight, that's power. Rule 2. Don't overexpose your life. Mystery dies when you post every detail of your life online. You don't need to delete social media, but curate it. Post less about your opinions, more about your presence. A photo of you hiking alone at dawn is worth more than 10 selfies with inspirational captions. The less people know, the more they assume, and the more they assume, the more they project. And that's where mystique begins. Rule 3. Pursue depth over display. Spend your time mastering things that matter to you, not to impress her, but to fulfill you. Learn something hard, develop a unique skill. Whether it's carpentry, philosophy, foreign languages, or martial arts, depth is magnetic. A man who is absorbed in something creates intrigue. Why? Because it shows he's whole with or without her, and that's irresistible. Rule 4. Never reveal everything too soon. You don't need to share your entire life story on the second date. Real connection grows over time. Instead of blurting out your childhood trauma or your 5-year plan, let her ask. And even when she does, don't dump your soul. Share pieces, let it unfold like a novel, chapter by chapter. This isn't playing hard to get. It's being worth discovering. Rule 5. Be unapologetically self-grounded. You don't need to make excuses for who you are. You like jazz over pop, say it. You'd rather read Marcus Aurelius than scroll TikTok, own it. Women don't fall for men who adapt to them. They fall for men who make them adapt to him. Your standards, your values, your boundaries, these are not up for negotiation. Ground yourself. She'll feel it before you speak. Rule 6. Don't fill every silence. Silence makes most people uncomfortable. Use that. On dates, in conversations, in eye contact, let space breathe. When you leave room for reflection, her mind does the work. She'll wonder what you're thinking. She'll lean in. And most importantly, she'll feel that you're not performing. You're just being. And that's rare. Rule 7. Always leave a little room for wonder. Whether it's the way you dress, the way you respond, or the way you look at her, always leave a little space for interpretation. That pause before answering, that glance that lingers just long enough, that sudden switch from playful to serious. These moments trigger the "what did that mean?" question. And if she's asking that question, you've already won. Because mystery isn't loud, it's felt. It's the tension in her chest when you leave, and she's still thinking about you. So don't try to be mysterious. Become a man who naturally is. Through discipline, through depth, through restraint. When your identity isn't worn on your sleeve, she'll chase your silence louder than another man's attention. And once you feel that shift, you'll never go back to over-explaining again. You've made it this far. That alone says something about you. You're not looking for tricks, you're looking for truth. And the truth is simple. You don't need to chase. You don't need to impress. You just need to become so deeply grounded in who you are that the world around you feels it. That's the essence of mystery. It's not about hiding behind shadows. It's about walking in your own light and not shining it in anyone's eyes for approval. A woman doesn't remember every word you said, but she'll remember how you felt. She'll remember the space you created, the pause between glances, the way you looked at her like you already knew yourself. And that feeling is unforgettable. The world is full of men trying to be loud, trying to be liked, trying to be chosen. But you're going to do something different. You're going to choose yourself. And in doing so, she will feel the gravity of a man who cannot be figured out in one conversation. She'll stay curious, she'll stay engaged, she'll stay invested, because she knows there's more to him than I've seen. And I want to see it all. If this video sparked something in you, don't forget to tap like so more men find this message, subscribe, and join the brotherhood of men who move with purpose, and drop a comment below. I move in silence and she feels everything. This is the Stoic spirit, and you are becoming unforgettable.